Hi, Tom. Hi,
Hi.
Jasmine. How are you both?
Good.
Marvelous.
Good.
Marvelous.
Lovely. Lovely. Tom, I love your artwork behind you.
Thank you very much. Left and right, right?
Yeah. So we have a little bit of a different format today for our curated conversations because this time Jasmine and I are interviewing you, Tom, about an upcoming show. And so you are sitting in the artist seat.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I like being in the artist seat because that's kind of where it all started out so many years ago.
Exactly. And so just to highlight for our members, we have two shows happening at the same time. And one is within our main gallery space, Once Upon an Ocean. And Tom, you curated this with Elise. And then second to that, we have your photography show within the Rick Ferries Gallery. So was hoping today to talk about both, but wanted to start with your photography exhibition because I think a lot of people know you as the founder and the director of Masterworks, but I don't think they understand, your history with arts and how you started with your interest in photography. So maybe you can take us all the way back to the beginning to share your experience, maybe even at Work Academy, Ryerson, and how exactly you fell in love with the art of photography.
If we have all day, and unfortunately we don't because I'm 24 hours, I'm going to be somewhere else that is taking me off the trail a little bit. But it's just so what's the word I want? It's so encompassing. It's absorbed absolutely everything that I've done, and it has led me because of my university years. It's led me to be able to explore all the possibilities. So how did it go back? Well, I cannot say that school was influential because school, where I went to school, art was kind of a minor thing. It was downplayed. The only thing that I can say is I remember doing potato cuts with Miss Rose, and Miss Rose was an awfully pretty lady with red hair. And I fell madly in love with her. Of course, she was 3 times my age, but still, a little boy can dream. But then you go away to school and there's no art. So I actually became kind of, I rebelled a little bit about education, and I was not a good student. And I grew up in a very competitive family. And so with a competition and already an older brother who got a Rhodes Scholarship when I was just going into school, and he's out and he's got a Rhodes Scholarship. Actually, he's a Rhodes Scholar elect. There was this whole kind of competitive thing that was going on in the family. So in a way, when I made my first image in Europe and I came back and looked at what I was doing, I thought, whoa, I think I've fallen in love with something. So I needed to find it. So I bought my first 35 millimeter Pentax that came with a nice big black leather bag and a telephoto lens. And film. Of course, I had no darkroom, so I didn't know how to do the developing. So I would send that away, and prints would get made. And then, of course, you take the next step. So you go away to school, and you're at your school. You go, do night classes, and you get into the darkroom, and you start to make prints, and so on and so on. And then this is a life lesson. I was pretty chuffed about the photographs that I was making, and I went and applied, and I was up against 1,500 applicants for 125 spots. So my chances are not good. However, I'll never forget this, the guy did the interview and go, you got any questions? Well, he went through my portfolio so fast that, no, I don't even have time for a question because I've just been insulted. And so I left knowing that I didn't have a chance. So I went back to summer school, and the 2 professors that I worked with there loved the work, loved the attitude more than anything else, the attitude and the work. They said, you're going straight into second year. So I jumped for the first time in my life, I jumped a year. That's never happened to me. I have failed before. I flunked grade 9, but to actually skip a year, whoa, that meant a lot to me. And I never looked back. And with that, I graduated with high honors. And I do mean high honors, as high as they could get. and kicked around Toronto, trying to live off my photography, showing in galleries, doing all that sort of stuff and preparing for it. And that prepared me for, and we'll come to that, about some of the programs that we now currently have in place. But then and over here on my right-hand side is a black and white photograph that I found up in one of many glass plates that were strewn across my grandfather's attic. Nobody in the family talked about the fact that this guy took out an 8x10 camera and made black and white photographs on glass plates. Wow. And he developed them on his own upstairs, after he'd done his day's work or whenever it was. And he was he had a really keen eye. He was good. And so many of them were broken. They were covered in dust. The cockroaches had eaten them. The emulsion was peeling away. And so this one you can see, I've made it intentionally because there's a photographic process called cliché vert, where on the glass negative, you would take a sharp pen or a knife and scratch it. So it has two things going on. It looks like a cliché vert in the middle or in the sails, and then you see the emulsion sort of like a ghost ship, going out of the image. So I printed it just as it, or had it printed just as you would find it, rather than try and crop around it. And I love that image as a result. And it's just it hangs up here in my office as another source of inspiration about my grandfather. So in a way, I guess while nobody talked about it in the family, it was somewhere in the blood. Although, families are weird. Why wouldn't we talk about that? I've never been able to figure that out. Got to talk to George about that, my older brother. Anyway, let's move on. So I come back to Bermuda, and I'm giving you, Jasmine, the short version. I mean, we could stay here all night long and get into this.
Oh my goodness!
I never approached this way. I come back to Bermuda, having kicked around Toronto, and I think I want to do a show here. I want to live on my prints. I want to live as a photographer. Work a couple of days of the week, go out and photograph, and all the rest of that stuff. Well, man, did I get that wrong? I realized, and it was the only part of the homework that was really wrong, but it was the substantive one that was wrong, because man cannot live on bread alone, and my electricity bill and my in Bermuda was equal to my hydro, mortgage, and food bill back in Toronto. That's how expensive it was, and probably still relatively the same sort of way here today. And so doing a show, fast forwarding, doing a show now, some 39 years later, has made me high as a kite. What I had to do, and why the wait, is that I had to concentrate and create a museum and a collection and get a whole community's kind of psyche. And in the paper today, did you see that thing about the mural? Well, you know what? If we tried a mural 39 years ago, they would have said, "Hey, pal, you can take your mural and take it somewhere else. We're not having that sort of visual in town." So that's one of the things that we've done. But I digress. I too easily digress. So I realized that what we needed to do was kind of somewhere create a collection and a psyche that was prepared for the visual art. And so that's what we did, and gradually we built it up and built it up and built it up to the point where we have built a museum. And in the Rick Farris Gallery, I am flattered that I'm doing my first show there, because Rick Farris was an inspiration to me when he was on the board. And if there's any person that I know that did not deserve to die young, it is Rick Farris. He worked his butt off to be the man that he was. And as a chairman of our board, and boards can often sort of jerk your chain and have you lose your sense of mission and mandate. And Rick would always just simply say, "Tom, you get on with it. I'll defend you at the board. Whatever it is you need to do, I know that you have a sense of what needs to get done. Just do it." And so the idea that I'm doing a show called Bermuda in Another World speaks volumes that I'm doing it there, and I couldn't be happier. And I just today started to relook at some of the images that I made, and I'm looking at some of them for the very first time, which is good, because Carol Reed, who came in to curate, who's an outsider, and this is another key that's philosophically that's important. An outsider looks at this work and says, "Hey, don't think along these lines. Think big. Think whatever it is." Because my training in photography was first and foremost in black and white. That's how old I am. that the old format was make a series of 11 by 14, 8 by 10s. And the axiom was, if it doesn't work in a black and white, try color. And if it doesn't work in color, make it big. And if you can't make it big, make a gum print. The joke being, the further away you go from the integrity of the medium, then you might have something that works. Well, now we have sort of kind of flushed that all in, where we don't really think like that anymore. There are great photographers like Joel Meyerowitz, or like her name will come to me in a second. Who does everything in color. Cindy Sherman, for example, who dresses women up. She's all color. All her work is so we've eliminated that now. So our thinking has changed, and I think people are ready. But the subject matter for Bermuda in Another World was kind of brought to me through the years of having an absence of making images, and I was able to look at great artists doing great artwork and bringing it back to Bermuda, and it clarified some of the things that I wanted to express for myself through the medium of photography, and this beautiful island of Bermuda, and what we leave behind, what we abandon, what we discard, and don't even think about twice about making extraneous. And I feel sorry for that. So there are going to be some images that are going to make people laugh, and then there's going to be some images that will make people think. And I hope, if anything, we think about our environment. We think about the things that we can and should save, and we hope, we even to go one step further to be a less wasteful society. Bermuda probably is, without thinking about it, probably one of the most wasteful societies that I know of. We just throw everything out. And when I grew up here in Bermuda, that's the last thing we did was throw things out. We recycled everything to the nth degree until we could use it no more. But that's all changed. It's all changed. Anyway, so I'm happy about having a photographic show. Maybe we'll take it on the road. Maybe we'll show it overseas. Who knows? These are all dreams. I do thank Carol for stepping in. I'd like to thank Loris Tappan for doing the prints at Color Lab, because he is a perfectionist. Talk about take the anxiety out of. In our day, we would call it spotting, where you would spot the negative so that it did not look like that there was a hair or this or that, so that you saw. He does all of that. He's just absolutely brilliant. So it's taken so much of the traditional work that I would normally do out and put it in the hands of somebody. And I have never had somebody curate my work before, ever, ever, ever. I've always been my own curator as well, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, because getting an outside opinion has been helpful, because they see often what you don't.
For sure.
And Tom, one of the reasons I'm excited to see your show is that I love the subject matter of what you're capturing, and the way that you highlight both the beauty and the struggle of what you were just talking about with looking at what we save in our community and how we take care of our island, the environment, the structures, the people, etc. So when did you start taking photographs along this theme? How long has it been that you really led up to this show?
Quietly for some time, but I've never made a concerted effort. In other words, my imagery was all around sort of street photography, but it could be sort of in a shop window, or it could be somebody holding a baby, it could be a wedding, that it could have been an array of things. Now I'm simply focused in on that as a topic. And I did because, in some way, I also think psychologically that Bermuda is the perfect world microcosm. If we could solve problems environmentally, racially, socially, economically, other people could do it. But we've never really tackled that as topics. We have a tendency sort of to dance around these things, and yes, we're going to bring in more tourists and everybody will benefit. Well, we know that that's not true, because we're not the trickle down to, that it was. And so there's this layering that we have a tendency, like all societies, just shove it under the rug and forget about it. So I'm happy that again, through the last 40 years of absence, that I've been able to focus in on other people's work, and then subliminally been able to sort of focus in on that of my own. And it's been very helpful. So, you know, and I get these questions all the time. Tom, what are you gonna do in your retirement? And I keep saying, look, it's not retirement, okay, pal? I'm not a retiring kind of guy. I might, you know, focus in on other things, but I'm not retiring. Let's just get that out of our vernacular. You know, I will focus in on the photographic thing, and then there are a whole slew of projects that above the photography I just simply got to get on with that I've not been able to address. You know, I'm very happy that we're able to come to some conclusion 40 years later. The legacy is worth something. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I did, you know, just was told that today. You know, what a legacy! What a legacy! What a legacy! Mm-hmm. Okay, so. And, you know, I think the whole idea is that through photography, and thank God, by the way, in photography, I was introduced to Alfred Stieglitz, who then in the turn of the last century was blending photographs and painters together. And my knowledge through the teachers that I had at Ryerson in Toronto was such that as soon as I stumbled on the name, it opens up your mind and you think, okay, well, this collection is going to not be just about paintings. It's going to be about a whole other thing as well. It will bring in photography, and we have explored that. And I hope that when I step out and whoever is the incoming curator, I'll give them, him or her, a slew of names that have not yet made it to the museum walls. The most important addition to our museum wall is that of Elliott Erwitt, who was one of the founding members, a street photographer, who was one of the founding members of Magnum Press, who came here in 1953. I'd studied his work when I was in Toronto. I had no idea, and that's only 20 years later. Already in 20 years, he had established a pretty international name. The fact that Bermuda figures into his eye, both at college weeks in 1953 and in honeymoon couples. And the image that we have stumbled on, and it's a vintage print, is one where it's a brilliant, because all these couples are lined up against the wall, and simultaneously, every husband is lighting his wife's cigarette. I mean, it's just a brilliant image. It's something you would not see today. And it speaks volumes, about men and being polite. It speaks about women smoking in public. And it also speaks about men dressing up in their black ties. In fact, they were all in white coats. You know, it's brilliant. So there you go.
So Tom, I had a question. Going back to your story, do you remember the very first photograph that you took that you realized, you know, that ignited that fire for you? I know you mentioned it, but do you remember what that photograph was?
It was an early morning street scene in Madrid. And the atmosphere of the Madrid light that I did not see. Now that's the point. I didn't see what the camera saw. I was sort of taking an early morning snap because there was some raking light, but I didn't realize the overall effect that the light and the atmosphere was having. I was dumbstruck by it. And you know, it's, as I've said, you know, you look at things to see what things look like photographed, and this was something that was a real wake-up call for me. So it helped open my eyes and see things in ways that I hadn't seen before. So that was it. I'm trying to find it. I know it's in this house somewhere. I would give my eye teeth to find it. I have not given up looking. I will find it, damn it. It's because it's in a book. It's in a book.
That was my follow-up. I was going to say, do you still have it?
I do have it, but like everything else, there are 10 gazillion things around here. You know what we left the office looking like. You multiply that. That's only like 8 years in there. You multiply that like 30 times over here. Honey, you're in trouble. I mean, I have got to get through a lot of stuff here. And then I guess after that, it took a little while for other impacts. And I think it was one of a horse on running across Horseshoe Bay. And it was stop motion. Whoa, that's cool. And so it starts to, you know, go from there. So one from, you know, and you know, I don't think you're allowed horses in the mid-afternoon anymore on the beach. I'm not sure.
Not in the summertime.
Yeah.
And then Tom, very quickly before we wrap up, I was thinking it would be nice for you to maybe spend a minute just sharing a little bit more about Once Upon an Ocean and what you are planning to show in that exhibition.
Well, you know, the dirty truth is, Once Upon an Ocean, while I have curated it, is not one that, if I had my druthers, it would look slightly different. But we were slightly constricted by the amount of money that we had to, you know, for the funds of it. Typically, a show would cost us $60,000 to bring in all the bells and whistles and things like that. And thank God we've got people like, you know, Jasmine, who are filling in to help, you know, offset some of those costs. So we're trying to, you know, get it in under about $30,000 to $35,000. But the idea was really to sort of highlight some of the arenas or subtopics that we have under the Bermuda Muse. So architecture is a muse, people are a muse, flowers are a muse. I also talk a little bit about, there's a chapter in there called Choppy Waters, because I think that, funnily enough, I am reminded that, because you're Tom Butterfield on a small island, everything would have come easily. But it was not like that. It came with, we succeeded despite the backdrop of so much resistance, particularly from Front Street and the guys in suits, the guys who held the purse strings, who held they were the original 40 Thieves. There were some members who did not abide by the 40 Thieve edict, that if you're not a member of the Royal Bermuda Yacht Club, then you're therefore not one of us, and therefore you're not worthy, of which I refuse to this day to become a member of, because of that distaste that I have. I'm not bitter about it. I'm just, not anymore. I was just angry then at the time, and I'm angry now about being thrown under the bus, despite the fact that you have a Bermuda idea that cuts across, as I said earlier, in the photography thing, that cuts across race and attitudes and all the rest of that stuff. It makes everything accessible. That's really what you're trying to do, is open the pages up and make Bermuda, because I'm a big believer that, there's no such, utopia does not exist. It's impossible. Under communism, socialism, democracies, whatever, there's no such thing. But there is such a thing as trying to make a playing field more accessible. And that's what I have spent 40 years in trying to do, just make it more accessible. So the Artists of Front Street that we had was one such program. So the idea of coming back to this, the print over here and the programs, the idea of bringing in artists in residence, the idea that our museum does not take 60% and then 40% for the artists, but rather 70% for the artists and 30%. I digress too readily. So one of the things that I wanted to do was highlight sort of the threads. Remember that no one had done anything along the line of exploring. If you have Winslow Homer and you have Georgia O'Keeffe and you have Andrew Wyeth, well-documented visits to the island. In the case of Wyeth, there was a beautiful print made of the oarsmen out in Ely's Harbor. You've got all these things, but nobody was doing something about it in a concrete way so that we could identify through the eyes and hands and genius of others, something about ourselves, something about our island, something about our history, something about our culture, our art, whatever it may be. Nobody was doing anything. So we put the shovel in the ground and we went back, because I'm big on the sort of the connective tissue thing. So we realized that Princess Louise, who came to Bermuda in 1883, was the first individual who extolled sort of the beauty, the muse of the island. And she wrote about it pretty eloquently. That said, we have found that years later, the original logbook of Princess Louise coming to Bermuda. So that is a must-have for the museum, in my mind. We have a Winslow Homer SS Trinidad, which was the first purpose-built boat to bring passengers from overseas and products to our island, commencing in 1885. That's a must-have because it's another connective tissue. Then we have connective tissues. We have on show the Andrew Wyeth Royal Palms, because it was a connective tissue in the idea that the public, both Bermudians and visitors, were responding to the idea of a treasure on the island for the very first time. Wow, say I. Look at what's happened here. So, only a dumbbell would think, oh, no response here, and walk away from it. You sit up and you pay attention. So the connective tissue is part of this exhibition. So connective tissues, choppy waters, artificial flowers, we the people, architecturally yours. Then pairings. Pairings is another chapter where artists will work, and particularly in Bermuda, because traveling with big large works is not often doable, particularly in this day and age where most people come by flight. The artists would go back to their studio and paint in large format. And so we have 4 examples of that. One is the ultimate precisionist American work by George Ault. Another is by Jack Bush, a Canadian artist who went into sort of color field studies, came here in 1934, but did his studio work 5 years later back in Toronto. Then there's Albert Gleizes, who did beautiful studies of City Hall, or Maison du Gouverneur, from the site of City Hall. It was then Hamilton Hotel, and he did that about 10 times. He loved that image looking out a north window into Government House. And then the last one is by John Hartman, who went up to Gibbs Hill Lighthouse and saw the world, and he saw it curved as one would. And he goes back to Pentanguishene in Ontario and paints these monster oil paintings of the island. And you see, in other words, another example of the world curve. Those are the only studies that he did while he was here. And he got to the island because Christo was down here with his wife, Jean-Claude, to do a lecture about a project that was coming up in New York called The Gates. So it's where art begets art, begets art, begets art. And that's why we got to get back into our artist in residence program. We got to bring programs back, not eliminate them. And I'm looking forward to a very youthful, exuberant, energetic, formidable, visionary young team to take all these programs back on and make it all happen, and make sure that we do say A is for art and it's accessible and it's for all, and on and on and on. So there you have it. But you see, in other words, someone asked about a catalog. Well, we don't have a catalog. We don't have the money for a catalog. Would I wanted a catalog? Yes. Would I want to talk about the show extensively in the form of a catalog? Yes. Why? Because what we started back in 1987 didn't just happen. We didn't say, oh, you know what, we're going to do this. And then you dip into your own pockets. You got to go out there and raise the money. You got to convince people to buy. If there's anything that concerns me the most, because I take this meaningfully, with the discovery of photography was the discovery of freedom and self-education. As I said, I was not a good student, but to me, self-education or education is freedom of sorts. So that's important to me.
Yeah.
Very important.
Well, I know I speak on behalf of the team to say that we're excited to be part of this young and dynamic group to take the museum forward. So thank you for sharing your background, your interests, really getting to understand, why both shows are important to you. So I look forward to welcoming the public in. February 6th is the opening date for both of them. And Jasmine, remind me when Tom's photography show closes.
It closes on March the 2nd.
If it closes in February, I'm out of here.
March.
I'm not putting it up.
March the 2nd.
I mean, some people may think it's nepotism, and I'm fine with that. After 39 years, I think I deserve a little nepotism,
Okay, so we've got about a month for Tom's photography show. So we hope that everybody comes by to take a look at it. But thank you, Tom. That was wonderful. And until next time.
Yeah.